From the Chinese perspective, the greatest evil of the war in Ukraine is the potential of nuclear escalation and generating a nuclear disaster which will be the end of mankind.
Britain and the US appear to be closing ranks against China with the signing of a new Atlantic declaration. Rishi Sunak and Joe Biden have met in Washington, D.C. and announced an economic alliance aimed at developing the technology of the future in the West and ending an era of so-called unfettered globalisation. Victor Gao is Vice President at the Centre for China and Globalisation and worked closely with former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. Victor, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's good to speak to you. So this is freezing China out, as it would appear, by Britain and the United States, freezing China out as we go forward, and especially when it comes to things like supply chains. Will this have a big impact on China?
First of all, it will be completely ridiculous and unrealistic to think that you can freeze out China. China is here. China has been here for 5,000 years. And I would not be surprised if China will continue to be here for another 5,000 years. And I think the United States and the United Kingdom need to ask what will happen to them in the coming 5,000 years. Secondly, China's economic development has contributed more or less to about 1/3 to about 35% of the additional global GDP growth for many years in a row. If you want to freeze out China, you freeze out additional global economic development. You actually pit yourself against the growth and development. It's a dead recipe before it's really adopted. And I think for the United States and the United Kingdom to think they have enough wherewithal to freeze out China, it's not only ridiculous, it is only laughable. It is really does not reflect on the pragmatism and realism that a country like the United Kingdom has been known for historical terms. I hope the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will realize what is the United Kingdom today and will focus on doing things pragmatic and realistic and generating benefits for the British people rather than indulging in fantasies which will not serve the fundamental interests of the British people by any stretch of the imagination.
Is there something in this, Victor, in that China is not acting as a serious player in some capacities on the world stage? For example, China's stance on the conflict in Ukraine appears to be to try to encourage Ukraine to stop fighting against Putin, the aggressor. Is that where this sort of action stems from, is that China isn't treating global affairs seriously enough?
You talked about Ukraine. Allow me to emphasize, from the very first day of the war breaking out in Ukraine more than 1 year ago, China has always been standing on the side of peace. And by today, China's peace proposal is the only peace proposal on the table. China has been calling for the end to the war through diplomacy and negotiation, and China has been urging for no longer pouring more fuel onto the fire in Ukraine. From the Chinese perspective, the greatest evil of the war in Ukraine is the potential of nuclear escalation and generating a nuclear disaster which will be the end of mankind. Therefore, I would say China has been playing a very important role of tranquility, stability, good officers, try to bring all parties together to the same table to talk about peace, rather than to continue to agitate for more war. The continuation of the war in Ukraine will not serve anyone's interest. It is time to end the war through diplomacy. And I hope countries like Britain will realize that it is in its own interest to end the war in Ukraine rather than prolong the war in Ukraine.
Sure, I think peace is a shared ambition. I just wonder if China's own strategies for trying to bring it about are what is causing alarm in the West. Indeed, to the extent that the US, is looking to secure special deals for the UK similar to the ones being negotiated by other allies like Japan, Australia, and the EU. The whole idea here, Victor, is that the world is moving away from reliance on China. That's the theme.
I don't think so. I think the globalization, which has generated so much benefit for everyone involved in the world, will continue in another form, definitely, but no one can stop globalization. And I know in the Atlantic Declaration, the United States and the United Kingdom talked about AI. AI will be a global phenomenon. It will not be a phenomenon only involving, let's say, the United States or the United Kingdom. It will be mankind's AI in general. And when we talk about AI, there is another side. That is, there is a danger that AI may get out of control, causing a threat to mankind as a whole. It is time for mankind to cooperate rather than to sow discord in talking about AI. Therefore, I think the zeal about the United States and the United Kingdom talking about freezing out China is dead from the very beginning and will generate disasters rather than benefits for the American people as well as for the British people.
Victor, it's a stark warning. Thank you for your time this morning. Good to have you on the programme. That is Victor Gao, Vice President at the Centre for China and Globalisation, who also worked with former Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping.